Continuing on, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 12. And then we're also going to jump very briefly into Psalms. So this was something we wanted to do originally, and it just got a little bit more complicated than I wanted to make it. So David writes a lot of the Psalms. And, it's a really interesting study to read some of his Psalms with the stories, and we didn't really quite have time to do all of that in every single episode, but I did want to dive into one of the Psalms here very briefly, so we'll do that at the end. So, welcome back to the Physics of Faith podcast. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Tim.
And we are continuing on in the life of David, as we say as we start every single time we start one of these, not exactly going chapter by chapter, but just through the life of David, the highlights and the lowlights, as we're just starting and getting into, and we're getting into some of the more of the lowlights. But so, like I said, we don't have the time to go chapter by chapter because that would take forever. So we're going to skip ahead a couple chapters here. Basically, just kind of recapping our last week. 2 weeks before that is the issue of David and Bathsheba, and he has Uriah killed. And so last week we talked about his what came of that. Nathan rebukes him. He confesses to God. God strikes down the son that's born of them, born of Bathsheba, and then he repents, he covers Bathsheba, and Solomon is born out of that. We'll get more into Solomon later on, kind of in our last couple episodes, because that's kind of how we end the story of David, with Solomon taking over the throne. But so I want to recap briefly what happens. We're going to pick up in chapter 15 of 2 Samuel, so I want to briefly recap 13 and 14. And, as we said in our last, God said, the sword will never leave your house. Basically like, hey, it's going to get bad for you, David. God begins to punish David because of this. And we see that. So basically, in chapter 13, Amnon, who is one of David's sons, he basically rapes his half-sister Tamar.
Yeah.
And she is the sister of Absolom, who is another one of David's sons. Remember, David's got several wives and several concubines, and so he's got children and all these from all these women, and so you get Amnon was his half-sister, the half-sister of Tamar. Absolom was the full brother. And so Absalom is angered by this.
Yeah.
And he kills Amnon, or at least Absalom's men kill Amnon because of this. Again, as we go back, so remember, as you mentioned, which I hadn't thought about, the punishment for stealing the sheep was fourfold, right? To pay back 4 sheep. And 4 sons of David would die because of that. So we've got the first son that was born of Bathsheba did. Now we have Amnon being killed. So Absalom was banished from Israel for years because of this. And David mourns the death of Amnon, but he doesn't do anything to reconcile with Absalom. And you read a lot of comment, and that was one of the things that David is criticized for, is he doesn't really do anything with Absalom. He's just kind of like, go away. And he doesn't do anything to really reconcile that.
I think it's a struggle, but because David is also, you can kind of criticize David for how he handled Amnon and Tamar.
Yes.
Like, he's mourning his son, the rapist,
right?
And so there's kind of this, and the son and the brother who said, no, justice.
Yeah, this isn't right. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's, and I think that's why Absalom does that, because and so again, all of this, one little screw up can cause so many other screw-ups. Right. And there's no right answer to the right, and so he doesn't handle Amnon right. Now he doesn't really handle Absalom right. Joab, who is basically one of leader of David's military, he sends a woman to talk to David to trick him into seeing Absalom, basically.
Yeah.
And he tells this story, and it's kind of complicated to really go into, but basically she tricks him into seeing Absalom. Absalom returns to Israel, but he doesn't see David for 2 years, and so he's there, but David won't see him, and Absalom is angry about that. Mm-hmm. He wants to. It's interesting part. He wants to see Joab. Send Joab, and Joab doesn't come. He says, send Joab. It's like, well, fine. If he won't come, go burn his field. and so they go burn Joab's field, and Joab shows up. What the heck was that about, man? Basically, to really make a long story short, to summarize that.
Yeah.
And then Absalom eventually does finally go in and see David. He bows at his feet, and David kisses him as not as full. Like, hey, this doesn't undo everything, but that is a sign there that, like, all right, we're kind of moving on a little bit. So
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the stuff we see as this happens, David is not handling some things well, but Absalom is not responding well either.
yeah,
He's taking justice into his own hands. He's burning people's fields.
Yeah.
He's trying to make nice to the king, but he's clearly believing he could do this better than David.
Yep. And as we see here, he tries to prove that. So continuing on, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 12. And then we're also going to jump very briefly into Psalms. So this was something we wanted to do originally, and it just got a little bit more complicated than I wanted to make it. So David writes a lot of the Psalms. And, it's a really interesting study to read some of his Psalms with the stories, and we didn't really quite have time to do all of that in every single episode, but I did want to dive into one of the Psalms here very briefly, so we'll do that at the end. So starting in 1 Samuel chapter 15, we'll start verses 1 through 6. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. So Absalom is basically trying to overthrow David at this point, and he's kind of beginning to try to, remember in the early days, David, it's like Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s, and he has all these soldiers, and everything he does is. And so Absalom is trying to fake that.
Yeah,
he's getting together chariots, he's getting together horses, he's gathering men to run with him. He's trying to make it look like he is in charge and to build this army to look good. David's army was always successful because he had the hand of God with him.
Right.
Absalom was basically just for show.
Yeah. Well, Absalom, man, you say for show, because Absalom was also this very attractive young man.
Yeah.
Again, much like David was described, but Absalom almost to a point of vanity.
Yes.
And
we would see that would be that.
Yeah.
We'll see that becomes a big issue.
Yeah. And so Absalom is kind of the superficial version of David.
Yeah.
In that sense. But what he's doing here at the city gates is he's essentially telling all the people, I would be a better king.
Yeah.
I should be doing this because David's not actually going to hear you.
Yeah.
He's not giving anybody to hear your plight. And believe me, your plight is a good plight. People should hear about what's going on.
Yeah.
And in fact, if I had any power, I would do something about it.
He's basically acting like a very, very slick politician. He's literally shaking hands and kissing babies.
He really is.
Because it was very very specific what he was doing here, that they would come down and they would bow. He's like, no, don't bow to me. Let me shake your hand. He's exalting himself.
Yeah.
But he's also trying to make it look like he's not, like he's a man of the people.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a very pointed thing that you point there. He's not only he's putting all of these soldiers together and creating this army for him, but yes, he's speaking negatively of the king of Israel. It's like, hey, he's not there. He's not going to take care of you. There's no one here to let me take care of you. Let me help you out.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to remember too, when folks like Absalom do this, I think Absalom believes his own hype.
Yeah.
Right? Absalom believes he would be a better king. And I think he has some genuine complaint against how David has handled his brothers and him. So he's got this valid complaint, but that doesn't mean he's got the anointing that it takes to be the king of Israel. It doesn't mean that he is who can resolve it. So as he even does all these underhanded things, he's not necessarily just hungry for power, but he is. And I think that's something in our own lives we have to sometimes struggle with is sometimes we feel like we have very good motivations for what we're doing.
Yeah.
But in reality, we're just wanting to not have to answer to somebody else.
Yeah.
We're wanting things to go our way and not somebody else's way.
Yeah, our complaints can be valid, when things don't go right and things are wrong. That can be very, very true. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it can be very, very true that our response to those is not right either.
Yeah.
So continuing on in verses 7 through 12. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living at Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown, and so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. So, Absalom is acting like this is for God. He goes to David and he says like, "Oh, I made a vow to the Lord, so let me let me fulfill the vow that I made to the Lord." David's gonna say like, "Well, I'm not gonna deny what you did. What you're making a vow to the Lord, didn't want to deny that."
Right.
So yeah, he's acting like this is holy. He's acting like this isn't selfish. But we know the truth obviously here.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. He does all of this underhandedly.
Yeah.
So not only is he tricking David, he brings 200 men from Jerusalem, and none of them know what he's doing.
Right.
And he does this to create what looks like a show of force.
Yeah.
Oh, he left with 200 men.
Yeah.
And they're now all proclaiming that he is the king.
Yeah.
Right? So he does this to kind of entrap them, kind of tricks them into being a part of this. And tries to make himself look better. He also has this habit of going after David's different generals and advisors.
Yeah,
and he ends up getting Ahithophel to defect and come serve him. Mm-hmm. And this actually hurts David really, really deeply. And this becomes another psalm. Psalm 41:9 is a reference to Ahithophel. So. He's underhandedly sneaking around, pulling people in, stealing from the king's court, getting people to show up, and he goes to Hebron where David was first anointed and gets himself proclaimed king. Yeah.
Well, it's also important to note here that, he is the son of the king.
Yeah.
And so it's likely that, people were looking at this, people didn't see this, they didn't know what was going on. People didn't see what they didn't quite understand that what he's doing here is underhanding him. They didn't look at this as treason. This is looked at possible secession.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's going to be the new king. They very well could have thought that David is telling Absalom to do this.
Yeah.
Because David is older at this point, and so he's and so it's. I mean, that's the normal line for a son to take over for the king.
Yeah.
And so. People very well thought, oh, okay, well, this is. I mean, he's kind of David 2.0 in a way. Very attractive, very a good warrior. At least he looks like it. He acts like it, and they could very well think this is coming from David. They don't really have any reason to doubt Absalom at this point, and so it's very simple for these. Very understandable for these people. It's like, oh, well, I guess this is the right thing to do, perhaps.
Yeah, but it does put David in an awkward situation because they'll later come to him and say, like the next couple verses, they're going to come to him and say, hey, the hearts of the people are with Absalom. They're calling him the king. And this basically becomes a full-on rebellion of Absalom trying to set himself as king, and David, fearing for his life, goes on the run.
Yeah. So you bring up a good point. So, I mean, I wasn't really planning on reading these, but we'll just read the first couple verses here. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. So we must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." So David is realizing, like, oh, it hit the fan.
Yeah.
And so they get up and they flee. So as I mentioned earlier, instead of just continuing to read on in verses in Samuel, I want to read in Psalms, and I want to read, as we've mentioned very early on, one of David's, I guess technically his second job. He was a shepherd, but his second job was a musician. He was a very good player of the harp and the lyre, and so that's why Saul had him come, and that's how Saul got to know him. It's like, have someone play the harp for me to help my soul or my spirit, basically, to bring me peace.
Mm-hmm.
And we see David write some songs after Saul and Jonathan were killed, and we see David write a song that's like, hey, everybody needs to know this and sing it, and it's basically about the life of Saul and Jonathan. And so he writes all the book of Psalms, I guess.
Not everything.
I think there are some Psalms we don't exactly know the author, but we know a lot of them are from David.
He writes a good portion.
Yeah, so I want to pick it up in basically Psalm 3. Not a huge one, so I'll just go ahead and read the whole one here. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. I lie down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. Arise, Lord, deliver me, my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. So, again, recapping. So, Absalom has kind of taken over Israel, and David and basically his allies, the people that are still, what's the right word? Beholden to him or loyal to him.
Yeah.
The people that are still loyal to David, they all flee Israel. And so in that span, David writes this psalm. And it's interesting because you read this psalm, and it kind of sounds like what we read earlier when he was fleeing Saul. It sounds like, I feel like I've read this before. Right. I feel like I have heard him say this before, because he kind of has.
Yeah, how many times does David have to run for his life from someone who's supposed to love him?
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, as he writes this too, we see him be very, very specific. So I like this here, the line he talks about, people are saying of me, God's not protecting me anymore.
Yeah.
People see what's happening, and they're assuming that because Absalom's doing this, because people are attacking me, they're assuming I've lost the favor of the Lord. They assume that it's moved to Absalom, but I know that's not the truth.
Yeah.
And we even see this as he's fleeing. There's this Benjamite who curses him and is telling him, this is God's punishment against you for what you did to Saul.
Yeah.
Now, how many times have you met somebody in life that thought they understood God's ways, but clearly didn't? Because this Benjamite clearly didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Because God destroyed Saul's house.
Yeah.
Not David. It wasn't what David did to Saul. It's what Saul did to Saul. And God was the one who executed that judgment. So these people, as they see David flee, they're like, well, I guess he's not in favor anymore. I guess God loves Absalom more. Yeah. At this point.
Yeah, and it is important to note that, like, no, David is still the king of Israel, and nothing has changed that. And because, people asked God for a king, and he made Saul king. Yeah. And then Saul disobeyed, and he took the kingdom away from Saul. Now, he was still technically the king, but he wasn't the anointed king.
Right.
We knew, like, hey, David is the anointed king. Mm-hmm. And people kept trying, like, David, just take it from Saul. Like, he's lying there. He's asleep. He's got his back turned to you, and he's taking a leak. Like here's the opportunity. You got plenty of opportunity. God has got, and I think that, it is. I think that it's important to have people around you speaking truth into you, and but nobody knows what God has called for you better than you most of the time.
Yeah.
And so that's why we all need to have a relationship with the Holy Spirit to hear from Him, because not everyone is going to know all of the inner workings going on in your life, and people aren't going to know what God has told you. And so, David got some bad. It's like, no, I know that my time has not come. Like, I know I'm not going to kill Saul right here like this, because I know that this is not how this is supposed to end for Saul and how I am supposed to take the throne. And, when Saul eventually did die, David mourned because, like, this is not how this was supposed to go. God, the Lord anointed me king over Israel and anointed Saul the king over Israel. And I'm not going to kill the king of Israel. You know? And so much the same way, David's like, I'm still the king of Israel. Like, I may be on the run. I may not be on the throne, technically, physically, but God is still with me, and He hasn't left me yet. Because we saw God leave Saul, and David knew, like, I did wrong, and I know I did wrong, and God has punished me for that, but He also promised me that I wasn't going to die because of it, and I wasn't going to lose the throne because of it either.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. He has this promise of calamity.
Yeah.
He has this promise of judgment that hasn't come to pass yet.
Yeah.
And you're not going to die. I'm not going to kill you, but you will lose you are going to lose this child, and you'll have this calamity in your house. So David kind of has this knowledge that his judgment hasn't played out, and this was not part of God's judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is, again, it is important to be in your word, to be speaking with God, to be praying so that you could hear clearly from God. And it's also important to have people, friends in your life who can speak the truth, who, like Nathan, that can keep you accountable, and to call you out in your sin. But it's also very important to know when those people are also seeking the will of God and the truth of God and the Holy Spirit, and not just like, well, sounds like you're screwed. God doesn't love you anymore. You want good counsel, and you want it from the right people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that it's interesting. He says, in verse 7, he says, "Arise, Lord, deliver me, my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Breaketh the teeth of the wicked." He's not asking God to kill these people. He's not asking God to end their lives. He's like, can you make it so that we can get this over with? Can you in their bite, in their fight, in the fight,
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. I kind of just thought of it as God beating them up.
Yeah.
But you make a really good point that you take the teeth out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else to add to that?
I don't think so. I don't think I have anything here. I think this is this is a new chapter in David's life, and and here he goes, and he's much different than he was. He seems a lot more sad than he used to, but he still says, I have hope in God.
He's like, I call out to the Lord, and He answers me from His holy mountain. I lie down and sleep, I wake again, because the Lord sustains. He knows where his strength comes from. He knows the Lord got him here. And like it's fun. He knows that he is here because God put him on the throne of Israel, and he knows he's here running from his own son because of God, because this is God's punishment for the calamity that he has caused.
Yeah.
And so, in the good and the bad, he is still he knows that God is sovereign and that God is in control, and nothing can escape anything that God doesn't know about. Again, we as humans will mess things up just like David did, but God will be fair in the punishment for that, but He can also make good come out of that, just like Bathsheba and Solomon and those things. So.
Absolutely. One last factoid, because I don't think we're going to mention this later, but we mentioned Ahithophel defected and it hurt David.
Yeah.
David actually goes on to pray that Ahithophel's wisdom, because he's a counselor, he's supposed to give, will turn to foolishness. Yeah. And we see in chapter 17, Ahithophel is giving counsel to Absolom. Yeah. And one of his other counselors says, that's foolishness. Yeah. And I think Ahithophel ends up basically riding off into the sunset, so to speak.
He does.
And saying, okay, I guess it's over for me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that prayer answered.
Yep.
Even
when you're on the run. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little shorter episode today, but that's all right. So again, we just got a few things left going through this again. We're nearing the end of David's life. We're seeing the punishment for some of his errors, and we will continue on with a few more chapters.
All right.